I raised our first round of money when I was pregnant with my first child.
Congratulations.
And I raised another round of money when I was pregnant with my second. And I feel really proud that I've been able to both do this and have kids while doing it, which I think is not only challenging to balance, but also I think, hopefully destigmatizes for people that you can do this, right? Both as a working mom and a pregnant person.
Welcome to the Women on the Move podcast. I'm your host, Sam Saperstein. This season, we're delving into how strong communities create opportunities, foster belonging, and empower leaders to make a lasting impact. In this episode, I'm speaking with Anna Harman, co-founder and CEO of Studs, the brand that's reimagining ear piercing and turning earcaping into a cultural phenomenon. With a background in law and startups, Anna is reshaping the retail experience by blending fashion and self-expression in a way that feels fresh, inclusive, and bold. Anna, welcome to the Women on the Move podcast. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have to talk about your founder story for Studs. What brought you to the realization Studs needed to be in this world, and why did you want to create it?
So about 6 years ago now, I went to go get another piercing, and I went to a very fancy place that's actually quite nearby where we are recording. And I walked in on a Sunday afternoon, and they told me that I would probably have to wait 2 hours. They didn't take appointments, and I would have spent somewhere between $750 and $1,000.
Wow.
And so I left, and I went to a tattoo parlor, and I got pierced at the tattoo parlor, and the piercing was done healthily and safely with a needle. And I really liked my piercer. However, the jewelry was terrible and it was still expensive. And so I left wondering, where do you go if you're me? You want to have a piercing that's done with a needle.
Yeah.
You want the jewelry to be cute but affordable.
Yep.
You've graduated from the mall brands. And the answer was you go to the tattoo parlor. And I thought that wasn't a great answer.
Before I'd really thought about your company, I really didn't think much about piercing. I had my ears pierced when I was in 5th grade. I went to my doctor, it's my pediatrician with that big gun, pierced the two. And I have to tell you part of my piercing story. So a few years later, I decided I needed another. And I was in summer camp and I was 13.
Uh-oh, safety pin is coming.
Safety pin and a bunch of ice from the nurse's office.
Woo-wee!
Wow, that took a while and I would never do that again today. But there I had my second pierce. So somewhere in between all of those experiences and your experiences, there seems to really be a need.
Yeah, I think, for most people, if you got your ears pierced either at the doctor's office with a pediatrician or at a local jewelry store, which was my experience, I got them when I was 8 at some very local place, you graduate from that and you want to go somewhere else. And you also definitely want to be being pierced with a needle. And in most contexts, that means you're going to the tattoo parlor, which even if you're 13 and your parent is bringing you, is really not the place for a young person to go. And I personally felt very out of place in the tattoo parlor. And again, Studs was really born out of feeling that need for myself.
I love that. Okay, so tell us about the business now. 6 years in, how big is it? Where are you?
Yeah, so we're based in New York City. We have 34 stores all across the country.
Great.
We have a team of about 300 between corporate and our field employees. And we feel really lucky. We started the first store in 2019 in Soho, and we knew instantly that we had what in startup world is called product market fit because there were lines, celebrities were coming to the store. And so we felt like we knew that this thing should exist in the world, and then we made it, and it really worked.
And did you have a target customer in mind in the beginning or even throughout this whole time?
Yeah, we really made the brand for an 18 to 35-year-old. And that's everything from the positioning, the product that we carry, the influencers that we work with, the celebrities that we court. And I think it's really proven true that that is also the core customer. We made it for that customer, and then it worked out to be that way.
So then thinking about what you described as the need, would you say there's competition really for what you're doing or?
It's interesting. I think when we do customer surveys, what the customers say to us is that the competition is the tattoo parlor. If not for Studs, they would go to the tattoo parlor.
Right.
And there are 20,000 independent tattoo parlors in the U.S. And so it's obviously a very saturated market.
Yeah.
And then I think in terms of competitors otherwise, not really. I really think we are the brand that you graduate to when you're on a second piercing and beyond.
That's so interesting. And there could be very much beyond. So when I walked into your store in Rockefeller Center, I saw a picture of the ear and all the many places one could get pierced, and you only focus on ears.
Yes.
I had no idea you could get pierced in that many places on your ear. So break it down for us.
Sure.
Because I'm only familiar with the lobe and maybe this upper part.
Well, soon I feel like you're going to be familiar with more if your daughter asks.
Maybe.
So the main thing for us is, as you said, we only focus on the ear, and needle piercing allows you to do much more intricate piercings on the ears. And so while I only have 9 as an example, we have customers that have 20 to 40 piercings on their ears.
Wow.
Yes. My most intricate piercing is my rook piercing, which is basically a piercing that's on the shelf of the ear, right up here. But I really encourage people to go into the studios and experience consultations with the staff there, because they can tell you all about your ear anatomy and what you should get pierced and what will look good on you.
I had no idea, but thank you. I will do that. And so when you launched the company, you came up with this term earscaping. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so we actually trademarked it, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
It is the combined art and science of getting multiple piercings on your ears and then wearing many different types of earrings, resulting in what we call an extreme version of self-expression.
Love this.
But really what it is that the point of getting ear piercings is not to have holes in your ears. The point of getting ear piercings is just to wear earrings. And every day, many people change up what those earrings are to reflect what they feel like that day or something they're trying to say about their style to the world. And we really wanted to encapsulate that in a term, and that's where earscaping was born.
You can think about that in the terms of like landscaping, how you're trying to make everything look beautiful
Or
and have a
tablescaping.
place, or tablescaping. So I really appreciate that. When I went to the store, I saw all the different jewelry you sell. I actually picked this out. And I picked out something for my daughter for her birthday with her birthstone. Just don't tell her that quite yet. But there seemed to be something for everybody. And I was helped by a very nice male assistant who also had many piercings. And I think just felt very comfortable showing me different things. And so it was really nice to be welcomed and explain things, I guess, in a way I really never
Had
done.
thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really value hospitality at Studs. And so when you're coming into a Studs, you should feel very welcomed. And in some ways, you're having a small medical procedure if you're getting a piercing.
Mm,
And so the environment should be one that makes you feel both excited and calmed, right,
Yeah.
about doing that.
yeah.
And we really focus a lot thus on the hospitality experience and training in order to have the staff feel equipped to make you feel like that.
So it's interesting to say that. I really hadn't thought about it that way, but you have to balance health and regulations, which I'm sure there's, complexity that comes with that, with the experience and the retail side of it. So how do you innovate knowing that you have to follow certain rules?
One of the things I like the best, frankly, about the business is the rules. So back in my former life, I was a lawyer. And so when we learned how complex regulatorily it would be to open Studs across the country, I was sort of attracted to that. I think other founders might have been put off. But I liked that because I was like, ooh, this is sort of complex and weird.
Yeah.
That was positive to me. And I liked the idea of sort of being forced to innovate with those constraints. And so I think that's been a benefit to Studs and is a moat to our business.
I love that. Okay, so you did start your career as a lawyer, went to law school, you're at Bridgewater, very different business and not an easy place to be. I mean, a really intense culture. Did you bring any of that into Studs or just what learnings, I think, did you capture there that you brought into the business?
So first of all, I loved Bridgewater and I spent almost 5 years there. And to your point, it's not for everyone, but it was really for me. And I went there because of 2 things. One, I was actually very attracted to the culture and very direct, very feedback oriented, very transparent by my nature. And then secondly, I really wanted to learn what Ray talked about at the time as the management principles and then, subsequently published the book on.
Yeah.
And I liked learning about those things because they teach you how to think about running a company. And he thought about Bridgewater not as running an asset manager, but running a company, like an operating business. And so that was really valuable to me. And then in terms of what I've brought to Studs, very feedback oriented and transparency oriented. And we have actually now one of my former Bridgewater colleagues works with me at Studs, which has been really helpful to me.
That's great. You also had time at the incubator at Walmart, which I imagine really helped you understand how products come to market, how a big retailer sells those products. What were some insights there that you also took away?
I think the 2 things that I really learned at Walmart were, one, how big companies worked. I'd never worked at a big company. And obviously here I was at the biggest company in the US, right? Walmart, for those who don't know, employs 2.3 million people. Like that's the population of many cities in the US, right? And so I loved learning about that because I always sort of wondered that if I started my own company and I ever wanted to sell it, it was going to be important to understand how big companies that could be
Mm,
acquirers worked.
absolutely.
The other thing I really learned about was we saw a lot of businesses that had raised capital from outside investors.
Yeah.
And so I learned more about that process
Mm,
and that network having been at Walmart. And so I liked that in terms of how it set me up to go raise money for studs.
that's great. That's so helpful down the road. So when you think about as an entrepreneur, the people, the community that you need to succeed, how did you build that when you decided to go out on your own? And what would you say your community resulted in?
Yeah, the first thing was I think you have to be willing to get to know everyone and talk to everyone and sort of be unabashedly
Mm.
networky is one way, I guess, to
And
put it,
curious?
and
Meaning,
curious.
yeah.
And so what I had done really at Walmart was I had met a lot of people in the investment community, the startup investment community in New York, in particular in consumer investment. And I really facilitated and I guess continued those relationships as we were thinking about starting studs.
Mm,
I stayed connected to those people. I kept them updated on what I was working on.
right.
And so I used these connections I'd made through my former job to help me when we were going to raise our first round of money.
I love that. And did they help you too in thinking about the experience you wanted to deliver and how you would rethink the piercing experience?
It's interesting. I would say that was really my co-founder and I on our
Mm,
own.
yeah.
And one of the things that I liked about studs was, on the one hand, we weren't reinventing the wheel, right? Of course, if you'd wanted to go get pierced the day before studs opened, you could have gotten pierced. The point was that we had to envision what we thought our ideal experience
Yeah.
was going to be and then make that come to life. And I liked being able to do that in real white space
Mm,
because it really didn't exist.
right, right, right. And so what did you want that customer to feel like from the minute they walked into the door till when they left?
So I think, first of all, we were really focused from an environment perspective on combining what looks like a chic med spa, because you're
Mm,
obviously having a needle put through your ear, with a place that feels really fun for you to go with your friends to take pictures at. And so we really wanted the design to evoke that. Separately, we were very interested in combining the idea of getting ear piercings and wearing earrings, whereas in the past, most people would go to a tattoo parlor and they would get their ear pierced, and then they would go to a mainstream brand to buy earrings.
right.
And we were really focused on creating a combo of those two experiences in one place.
Oh, I love that. And you can see that right away. You can see the store design as experimenting, creative. It's very open.
Hmm.
And with the choices I think that you have, it was interesting. Like, had I gone forward for piercings, I probably would have come out with a million more choices and
Yep.
things I wanted to get. So you could see that off the bat.
Yep.
So you launched the business right before COVID. I can't imagine that was, easy to do when you are a retail in-person experience, can't pierce ears over internet. So what happened during this time and how did it help you pivot the business?
Yeah. So we had closed our Series A literally 2 weeks before COVID.
Wow.
We were very lucky in retrospect to have been able to do that.
Yeah.
And then we only had two stores at the time. We closed both of them for about 6 months. And we were forced almost immediately into focusing on the e-commerce side of the
Mm,
business,
mm,
which I think we would have gotten to, but for COVID. But all of a sudden it became top priority because we had to make money and we didn't have studios to make money.
right.
So we spent really what I would say is a year and a half very focused on e-commerce, even though we started to open stores again in 2021. Really not until 2022 were we opening at, I would call it, a fast clip.
Mm. So you were focusing on the jewelry, designing it, producing it.
And figuring out how we would differentiate ourselves in the market. And
Yeah.
one thing that I think has been interesting to learn as Studs has evolved is that the jewelry that we sell the best is the jewelry that is what I would call piercing adjacent,
Mm,
meaning things that people who have a lot of piercings want to buy. And so we've really started to focus in on those categories as things have evolved in the business in order to meet the customer where they are.
that's great. I mean, that's an expansion then of the brand into places where you're kind of being invited into by the customer,
Exactly.
right? They see you legitimately being there. So in thinking about the product, piercings, how has that opened up for you what community really means? And how have your customers actually expanded on this community?
It's interesting, I think when we started the business, we didn't know how much of a community element there would be. But what has proven interesting to us is that we have very large social followings on
Mm,
Instagram and on TikTok. And you see that there are really piercing enthusiasts out there that want to communicate with other piercing enthusiasts. And so when we post something like oh, I have 20 piercings on my ear. Let me tell you about them. All of a sudden, we are flooded with comments about people communicating with each other about how many piercings they have, comparing piercings. It hurt me. This one hurt me a lot. This didn't hurt me. This healed well. This didn't heal well. And so I think there's an inherent interest for people in communicating with others about their piercing experiences
Yeah.
in a way that I don't know that we knew would exist prior to studs.
I never would have thought of that. And so when you talk about piercing adjacent businesses or expansion opportunities, do you think the community will go there too? Do you think you'll have just more people in the community? What's your
I think at the end of the day, when you get your ear pierced, it's funny. When we started the business, I think we thought maybe it was sort of going to be more deep than it was to get your ear pierced, right? And as we've evolved and learned, I think we've done a lot of customer surveying, and we now equate getting your ear pierced to like getting bangs. It's like a little bit of a thing,
Right.
but it's not like getting a tattoo, right?
Yes, yes. It's not like getting a tattoo.
And I think when you think about talking to your friends about what haircut you're going to get, or I think I'm going to dye my hair, or I think I'm going to get bangs, that's what piercing evokes in people, right? They want to talk about it with their community.
Yes.
And so I think we've been really lucky because we have these small communities where people are talking about it amongst their friends, and these bigger communities where our following is talking about it amongst themselves because they're piercing enthusiasts.
Right. Oh, I love that. I never thought about that, but it's very much a self-expression mechanism.
Exactly. And, when I went to get the one that spawned this all, I'm sure at some level I wanted to feel a little younger. I was 34 when I did that, right? Like there was an impetus for me to do it. And it wasn't as deep, like I said, as a tattoo, but it was that I, wanted to do a thing.
Right, right. So you're very intentional about the self-expression part of the business, and you want that to show up to customers. How does that translate into, internally and your employees and what they see that they can do?
Well, first of all of the employees, the irony is people come to studs, and one of, the main things I say to them is you don't have to get a lot of piercings. Like, don't feel pressure, right? You can.
The average number is?
But they all have so many now. So I think it makes you really enthusiastic about piercings, which is great. So they're doing it themselves. And I love that because that means that they're also customers of the brand, meaning they can give feedback if they think there are things we should fix or improve, et cetera.
That is great. I love that. And as you think about training your employees and growing them for the future, what are the things that you're focused on doing? And have you taken anything you learned in prior companies and put that in, particularly to the development side?
Well, I think one of the most important things that we do is we train all of our piercers in-house. And we actually just launched what we call Studs Academy, which is a dedicated training studio in our meatpacking location in New York City. And so we began the company knowing that we would have to build an apprenticeship program for piercers specifically. And so they train with us for 6 weeks. They're paid while they're training.
That's great.
Many of the people that enter the apprenticeship program formerly were front of house folks that worked at the studios. And so we are very, very invested in training because we believe that if we can train excellently, we will provide excellent outcomes to customers.
Did this skill set just not exist in large enough degree to kind of hire?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things we learned that we didn't realize before we'd started the business is that there is no beauty school of piercing. And because there is no beauty school, there's no obvious place to recruit from, right?
Yes.
And so we had to basically effectively create our own beauty school.
Right, right. Okay. Was that hard to do, or did you?
I wouldn't say it was hard. I would say it was a necessity for our business. And so we knew very early on that we would have to do that in order to basically create and manage our own talent funnels.
So that's clearly important to your growth, and you're on this really nice expansion. What have been some of the moments that have really been most meaningful to you? The first store, the 10th store, what was it that was the big ones?
I think what is so cool always is when I go see any new store and you're just like, man, before me, this didn't exist. Right. And I love that, right? I remember, I think, really distinctly when I also started getting pictures from friends and family that would see stores in the wild because now there are so many of them, right? And they're all across the U.S. And I love that because I think you forget that you made something that didn't exist prior to you working on it. And that I feel proud of that all the time.
I love that. And so as you think of the next chapter, where else do you see additional opportunities? Is it more store expansion? Is it more accessories? Where's Studs going?
I think we're really interested in more store expansion. We think we can have hundreds of Studs across the U.S., which is nothing to say for international. And so that's really where we're focused.
That is great. And so on the innovation front, where else can you take this experience? Is it still about the piercing, making that core, or do you think there's something else to the experience?
I think we've always really been interested in tattoos. And so that's interesting for us.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, we have a lot of wood to chop. in the existing experience and bringing that to more people.
And as you look back on 6 years, which can feel like a long time, but frankly really isn't for a successful business, what would you say your most proudest moments and accomplishments have been?
I think, I raised our first round of money when I was pregnant with my first child.
Congratulations.
And I raised another round of money when I was pregnant with my second. And I feel really proud that I've been able to both do this and have kids while doing it, which I think is not only challenging to balance, but also I think, hopefully destigmatizes for people that you can do this,
Absolutely.
right? Both as a working mom and a pregnant person.
Well, and I think many founders, many women who are in the situation wonder if they're going to go into those meetings and the pregnancy or fact of being a mother will come up. Will they get asked the questions? Did you have any trepidation around that?
I didn't, but I'm also not really one to be worried about that. But we also never got asked about it, which is interesting.
That's fantastic. So if you were to talk to other entrepreneurs who have ideas, but they're not sure and they're a little worried about what to do, what would you tell them?
I think I would say go for it. I think the most important thing is to not let any preconceived notion that you have about how someone is going to react to your personal situation be a barrier, because that could happen, right? But it also just as easily could not.
Right, right. And I think a lot of times people anticipate
Yes.
the worst or something that they might not be able to deal with, but you have to put yourself in that situation first.
Exactly.
So, well, we are so excited to see the growth of Studs.
Thank
We
you.
can't wait for more stores and more rollouts, and maybe there will be more piercings over time for me.
Yes,
Not
there should
self-done,
be.
but thank you, Anna. It's been great to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Anna Harman. From redefining retail piercing to furthering self-expression, Anna Harman is proof that leading with vision and heart can change the game. As you reflect on today's conversation, consider how you might create new communities amongst your customers. And if you're thinking of starting a business, I hope you found the inspiration today to take the first step. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to it on your favorite podcast platform.